What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com. Here are my DFS picks for NBA Monday, February 27th. These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button and hit that bell icon so you don't miss our new videos. In this video, I'm going to go over my top picks for today's NBA slate. And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made. Okay, guys, we have a 4-game NBA slate tonight. So let's take a look at the point guard position. So stud on the slate that I like is LaMelo Ball from the Charlotte Hornets, playing the Detroit Pistons, who have the 3rd worst defense overall, and they give up the 5th most fantasy points to opposing point guards. LaMelo Ball has averaged 48.7 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 36 minutes per game with a 30% usage rate. He's projected at 46.7 fantasy points here tonight, but I think he can score 52 fantasy points or more and get you over 5 times value. He's $10,300 DraftKings salary, the same price on FanDuel, and Vegas thinks there's going to be 236.5 points scored in this game. So LaMelo Ball has scored 48, 63, and 65 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 39, 39, and 38 minutes. So he's playing monster minutes, almost 40 minutes a night the last 3 games. Now, this is not a back-to-back, so my guess is he's going to be out there for another 36, 37, 38, 39, 40 minutes. So you're going to get a ton of minutes out of LaMelo Ball in a relatively high-scoring game with a fantastic matchup. So I like him as a stud on this slate. So I like LaMelo Ball here versus the Detroit Pistons. Okay, another point guard that I like on this slate, I think this is a good value play with a lot of upside. I like Marcus Smart from the Boston Celtics, playing the New York Knicks, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall. They give up the 7th most fantasy points to opposing point guards. Marcus Smart has averaged 29.4 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 32 minutes per game with a 17% usage rate. Now he's projected at 28.6 fantasy points here tonight, and that's 5.2 times value. So even if he scores under his season average, you're getting over 5 times value. So that signals to me that he is underpriced, and he's only $5,500 DraftKings salary. Now he is $900 more on FanDuel, so I love that DraftKings price, but I think the prices are fine on both sites. Vegas thinks there's going to be 223 points scored in this game. So Marcus Smart has scored 19, 28, and 38 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 26, 35, and 29 minutes. So only 26 minutes last game. So I think he's good to go for 30 plus minutes here tonight. So Marcus Smart normally priced over $6K on DraftKings. So I think you're getting him at a pretty big discount here at $5,500. Let's see how he's done here versus the Knicks. He scored 35, 25, and 25 fantasy points in his last 3 games versus the Knicks. But I could see him going for 35 plus fantasy points here tonight, which would probably be close to 7 times value. Let's just see what it is. 35 fantasy points here from Marcus Smart at $5,500 would give you a value of 6.4. So I think that's totally possible. We know he has 40 plus fantasy point upside. I think he's going to play 30 minutes or more here tonight. He's averaging 0.93 fantasy points per minute. He's got a good matchup. So I like Marcus Smart here versus the New York Knicks. Okay, let's take a look at the shooting guard position. So I like Terry Rozier from the Charlotte Hornets playing the Detroit Pistons, who have the third worst defense overall, give up the fifth most fantasy points to opposing shooting guards. Terry Rozier has averaged 36.9 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 36 minutes per game with a 27% usage rate. So he's projected at a season average here at 36.9 fantasy points. That's 5.4 times value. He's only 6,800 DraftKings salary. He's 700 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 236.5 points scored in this game. Now, Terry Rozier normally over 7K, but he's had a bad last couple of games. But the reason is he was battling a hand injury, and now he is off the injury report. He's fully recovered. His hand is fine. So the last two games, he scored 21 and 24 fantasy points in 35 and 32 minutes. So you can see why his salary has been trending down, because he hasn't been a good play the past couple of games. But now he's rested. He's good to go. His hand should be fine off the injury report. And he's got a fantastic matchup here tonight. I think the price is right to roll the dice with Terry Rozier here versus the Detroit Pistons.
Before I continue with the picks, I'm excited today because we added a new contest for everyone watching.
If you want to enter the drawing for $25 PayPal,
all you need to do is like this video, hit that subscribe button, and make a quick comment below to be entered into the drawing. We'll reply to a random comment and let you know that you won.
And then we'll send you $25 PayPal.
So it's that easy, and we pick a new winner every Saturday and announce them in our video. So get your comment in now so I can add another entry for you.
Okay, so here's a mid-range play. I've got my eye on it. Not sure how I feel about it, but the numbers look pretty good here. So I like Jaden Ivey from the Detroit Pistons playing the Charlotte Hornets, who have the second worst defense overall, give up the 11th most fantasy points to opposing shooting guards. Jaden Ivey has averaged 28.9 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 30 minutes per game with a 25% usage rate. He's projected at 27.5 fantasy points here tonight. That's 4.9 times value, so just about 5 times value. And he's 5,600 DraftKings salary, 400 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 236.5 points scored in this game. Jaden Ivey has scored 30, 37, and 30 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 31, 30, and 26 minutes. So I think he's a decent play here for his price point, and I like that he scored 42 and 22 fantasy points in his last 2 games versus the Hornets. Seems like Jaden Ivey would be a good cash play, but he could be a good tournament play as well, because his last 5 games, 30, 37, 30, 32, 40. Now, one thing here for tournament, so the highest points he's scored in his career, or this year actually, the highest point, which I'm assuming that he's a rookie, is 49 points. So it looks like his ceiling is 49. So at 5,600, with consistent production, where you're looking at 30 fantasy points, which is over 5 times value, and then you've got 35, 40, 45, possible 45 to 49 or 50 fantasy point upside on the super rare case. I think that's a decent play here. So I like Jaden Ivey here versus the Charlotte Hornets. So Jaden Ivey could be a good run back player. Let's say you stack a couple Hornets. You expect this game to be a high scoring game, so you want to get a piece of both of these teams. Then you could play a couple of Charlotte Hornets, then you could run it back with Jaden Ivey. So if Jaden Ivey goes off and scores 40 plus fantasy points, then you're in a pretty good spot. Okay, so Any other shooting guards? No. Okay, let's move on to the small forward position. Okay, so I like Franz Wagner from the Orlando Magic playing the New Orleans Pelicans, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall. They're middle-of-the-pack defending opposing small forwards. Franz Wagner has averaged 31.1 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 33 minutes per game with a 24% usage rate. So he's projected at 30.7 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5 times value. He's 6,100 DraftKings salary, 600 more on FanDuel. And Franz Wagner has scored 34, 29, and 20 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 34, 30, and 32 minutes. Oh, and Vegas thinks there's going to be 228 points scored in this game. So Franz Wagner has scored 53, 27, and 32 fantasy points in his last 3 games versus the Pelicans. So that 53 is sticking out like a sore thumb in his last game versus the Pelicans. It's an encouraging sign. You feel, okay, he put up 53 fantasy points in his last game versus the Pelicans. Of course, they're going to give Franz Wagner the opportunity here to do it again. So let's see what happens. I think it's a pretty good play. It's a middle-of-the-road matchup. Relatively high-scoring game. Mediocre there. And his price is right if he scores his season average. That's over 5 times value. He's playing plenty of minutes. Usage rate is pretty good here. So I like Franz Wagner here versus the New Orleans Pelicans. Now, I also like R.J. Barrett from the New York Knicks playing the Boston Celtics, who have a good defense overall, and they've been good versus opposing small forwards. But R.J. Barrett has averaged 31.5 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 34 minutes per game with a 26% usage rate. He's projected at 33 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5.7 times value. He's 5,800 DraftKings salary, 600 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 223.5 points scored in this game. Now, I know this is not a good matchup here tonight, but R.J. Barrett has scored 41, 24, and 28 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 28, 27, and 32 minutes. So the minutes have been a little inconsistent or under his season average the last 3 games. So we're hoping he can bounce in here for at least 32 minutes here tonight. He's averaging 0.93 fantasy points per minute. So you can see how he could pretty easily get to that over 30 fantasy point mark. So I know it's a tough matchup, and that would be the reason not to play him. But I think his price tag is low enough where you can play him here and have a pretty good chance of him getting over 5 times value, and he could crush value here if he puts up a 40-plus fantasy point game. So I like R.J. Barrett, who has scored 28, 39, 35, and 26 fantasy points in his last 4 games versus the Celtics. So 2 out of those 4 games would have been way over 5 times value. So I like R.J. Barrett here versus the Boston Celtics. Okay, let's take a look at the power forward position. So this was a tough position for me. There was a couple of studs that stuck out, and then there was a handful of plays that I wasn't super sure about. So I'm going to go through them here. Okay, so the studs that I liked on the slate were Jason Tatum and Julius Randle. But out of the 2, I think I'd go with Jason Tatum. He's got a better matchup here versus the Knicks. And Jason Tatum has scored 64, 46, 27, 65, and 39 fantasy points in his last 5 games versus the Knicks. But he's put up 2 60-plus fantasy point games out of his last 3 games. So we know that Jason Tatum has easy 50 plus fantasy point upside, averaging 52.8 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 37 minutes per game with a 33% usage rate.
Real quick, guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all of our DFS tools for all sports. You can try the Position Optimizer, where you can see the top players ranked for each position. And we added a new Player Trends tool, where you can see the top salary differences between FanDuel and DraftKings. It's a really good tool to help you pick out value for the site that you're playing on. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups.
If we think he can score his season average here, then that's over 5 times value. So I think Jason Tatum is a good stud pick here, not overpriced. So I like that. And Julius Randle, he's a beast. He could absolutely get it done as well. But he is playing the Boston Celtics. Let's just see, how has he done versus the Celtics? So in his last 5 games versus the Boston Celtics, Julius Randle scored 53, 43, 38, 40, and 42 fantasy points. So they kept him relatively contained 4 out of the 5 games. So last game he put up 53, but all those other games he was looking in the low 40s. 40, 42, 38, so that's under 5 times value. So I'm not going to roll the dice actually with Julius Randle versus the Celtics. Looks like only 20% out of the last 5 would he have hit 5 times value. So I don't like those odds. And that's why it's kind of cool to look at the numbers here and analyze all the data collectively. And that's the value of Draft Dashboard that people underestimate when it comes to looking at all the statistics in one place and using your own brain to decide how to interpret those statistics, coupling that with your knowledge of the game, of basketball, of all the players and the teams, and all the changes throughout the season. And that's where the value comes. So for people that are really looking to play daily fantasy sports, the secret is to doing your own research, using your own information and your own gut feelings about the sport that you love to watch, and go ahead and analyze the data using a tool like the Position Optimizer from Draft Dashboard. And if you're on a laptop or a computer or a tablet, it works pretty well because you can see everything right here on one screen. If you're on mobile, you can see a lot of all the most important data on your cell phone, and then you tap on this dash rank here, the DD icon, the draft dash rank, and when you tap that, you're going to get all the additional data for the player, like his projected ownership, his projected value, chance to hit 5 times value. So you can see Jason Tatum at 10,200 DraftKings salary has hit 5 times value or more 60% of the time. So I think that's a really cool number to look at when you're looking at when you're deciding on a player. Like my next play that I think is interesting here is Tobias Harris from the Philadelphia 76ers playing the Miami Heat, who have a good defense overall, and they give up the 7th most fantasy points to opposing. Are we on power forwards? Yes, sorry, I went on a rant about Draft Dashboard, but I did think it was important to point out the best way to use the Draft Dashboard tools. And that's why I do these videos every day, to show you guys every day going through each position, using the tools to pick out the players, to show you the value of the software. And I do encourage everyone to give it a try. Link in the description. 30 days for $1. And you can try everything. And basketball is super awesome sport to use it with. There's a lot of nuggets of information that you're going to get just by glancing at this Position Optimizer. So we're still on Tobias Harris here. Actually, all I wanted to say about Tobias Harris is he's averaging 30.1 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 34 minutes per game. He's only 5,300 DraftKings salary. I still think he's underpriced. I know he hasn't been playing well, but he scored 24, 32, and 21 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 37, 33, and 35 minutes. So he's playing heavy minutes, and he's got the chance to easily score 26 fantasy points or more. And even if he scores under a season average, I mean, he's projected at 28.4 fantasy points here tonight, and that's 5.4 times value. So I know he's got to put together a game, but he did score 32 fantasy points 2 nights ago. So he's still got it, and it's a pretty good positional matchup here. So I like Tobias Harris here versus the Miami Heat. Okay, I also like Al Horford. He's at 4,800 DraftKings salary. He's averaging 24.8 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 31 minutes per game with a 12% usage rate. He's projected at 25.6 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5.3 times value. He's 4,800 DraftKings salary, 900 more on FanDuel. So I like Al Horford as a value play. I also like Kevin Love as an interesting play here. He is probable. Love was dealing with a knee injury, but he's likely to take the court. And he played last game for 26 minutes, put up 37 fantasy points. He's 5,400 DraftKings salary, 200 more on FanDuel. So he's projected at 27.6 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5.1 times value. So I'm not really sure how I feel about this play here. I think it's a risky play. Sure, he can put up 35 plus fantasy points, but it looks like if he's only going to play 20, 21 minutes, then there's a chance that he only puts up 20, 22 fantasy points, more around his season average. So I'm actually going to probably pass on Kevin Love, but I do think that there is some upside there. So let's move on to the center position. Already went over Al Horford. Oh, I gotta find another center here. I'm not sure why I don't have one marked. So let's use the tools and find a center that looks like they have some upside or some opportunity, and one of them is just sticking out. Right here is Jonas Valanciunas from the New Orleans Pelicans playing the Orlando Magic, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall. They're middle-of-the-pack defending opposing centers. Jonas Valanciunas has averaged 30.6 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 25 minutes per game with a 24% usage rate. He's projected at 35.4 fantasy points here tonight, and that's 5.5 times value. He's 6,400 DraftKings salary, 300 less on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 228 points scored in this game. Jonas Valanciunas has scored 28, 31, and 32 fantasy points in his last 3 games, playing 32, 29, and 31 minutes. So I think this is an interesting play here because it does look like his projected points is a little bit high, but it's a decent matchup here. And what I like about this play is that if he plays on average 25 minutes, in 25 minutes, Jonas Valanciunas on average gets 30.6 fantasy points. He's averaging 1.26 fantasy points per minute. So the last 3 games, he's been averaging around 30 minutes a game. So times 1.26 fantasy points, that's well over 30 fantasy points. That's why he's projected at 35.4 fantasy points. So when you look at it that way, that projection makes a lot of sense. So if we continue to get 30 minutes from Jonas Valanciunas, then he is underpriced here for his expected production. So I like Jonas Valanciunas here versus the Orlando Magic. Okay, and one other value play or a low salary play, high risk, high reward guy that just stuck out to me is Marvin Bagley. I'd have to look into this a little bit more here, but He played 27 minutes last game. It looks like he was out for a little while. Let's just take a look at him. Marvin Bagley. Let's look at his scoring log here. So, oh yeah. So he hasn't played for a long time, but he played 27 minutes last game and scored 46.5 fantasy points. And you got Isaiah Stewart here at the same position, questionable with a hip injury, uncertain to take the court. So they may be playing Marvin Bagley here. So just take a look. Marvin Bagley from the Detroit Pistons playing the Charlotte Hornets, who have the second worst defense overall and give up the absolute most fantasy points to opposing centers. Now, Marvin Bagley averaging 22.3 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 22 minutes per game with a 21% usage rate, but you can see he hasn't played in a long time, and now he could be the starting center. I just have to look into the news a little bit more deeply on this just to confirm this, but it looks like Marvin Bagley could be a pretty good play here. So projected at 23.8 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5.3 times value. He's 4,500 DraftKings salary, 400 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 235.5 points scored in this game. And Marvin Bagley scored 47 fantasy points in 27 minutes last game. I think he does have the opportunity to do it again here tonight and just break the slate possibly here. So I like Marvin Bagley here versus the Charlotte Hornets.
If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smickety smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this NBA slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again, and good luck.